All right, so I'm just going to record this. If you don't want your picture up, feel free not to have your picture up. That's fine. What I'm going to do is I am recording this so that everybody can go back and view it. What I would like to do is kind of just quickly touch upon what we've been working on. So I'm going to share my screen here. And as always, one of the things we can do, let me set that up. Okay, so you can get to the page one of two ways. You can either go through agenda, which will take you into today's agenda, or you can go to e-learning tab and you can click on the most recent one. So either one gets you there. So what I'm going to do is when we're done with this, I will put the recording right up here under the Zoom. Again, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask at any time. What I would ask is that you keep your microphone on mute until you have a question, but feel free to jump in anytime. Here's the basics. If you need to see any more about the test, some of you have jumped in and this might be your first time, check these two videos out because they will give you a good explanation. But basically what we do know is May 15th at 2 p.m. we're going to take a 45-minute long shortened DBQ. Instead of 7 documents, there's only 5. You're going to have a specific time period. You're only going to have 5 minutes at the end of that 45 minutes. So that'll be minutes 46 through 50 that you will be allowed to submit it. One of the things that they do talk about is whatever device you use to access the question in the prompt, that is the device you must use to upload. So that's going to be really important. They'll give us an opportunity to practice this a little bit farther down the road because, like everybody, they're kind of figuring things out as they go. So always keep that in mind. As you look at the modified DBQ, and again, I apologize if you've heard this before, here's the checklist. If you look at the rubric itself, it's very similar to what we have done with the 7 documents. The only thing they've done now is they've increased the total points from 7 points to 10 points, but really what they're doing is they're giving you 1 point for 1 piece of evidence, 2 points for 2 pieces of evidence. So you're really trying to demonstrate your ability to write an essay. Correct is important, but if you understand the template, then please that will help. Again, and there's 2 different versions of the rubric. We'll be looking at them a little bit more in depth in future classes, but this is just 2 different versions on how you can look at the prompt. Here's some basic DBQ writing the DBQ notes. So actually gives you some sentence starters, actually gives you a very good breakdown of how you should write this. It does advocate a complex thesis statement. I don't think that's absolutely necessary. So if you can write a good essay with supporting 2 strong claims, you'll be fine. I'm going to get that out of there. And then the last one is this planning sheet, which some of you have done and some of you have not. I'm going to show you a couple of samples here from period 4's DBQ. But again, what you're looking to do here is when I'm breaking down my documents, let me go up and this is document 4. Or this is the one for 4. And it was about the era of good feelings. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go in here and I'm going to copy. Let's see if I can do this. Under prompt, I'm just going to copy the prompt so I don't have to keep going back and forth to remember the prompt. And then as I begin to break these down, again, what we want to try to do is within 10 minutes, and you have to put a timer on because you have to get under 10 minutes. You should do prep work for 10 minutes. And what do I mean by prep work? Figuring out what each doc says quickly. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to write down what's the information I can pull from this that may ultimately help me with what I'm looking for from my prompt, which in this case is changes in perceptions of national identity, right? This whole idea of how did Americans begin to view themselves? So that's my question. Whoever's drinking, is that you, Luke?
No.
So put yourself on mute just till until you have questions, please, if you don't mind. So I'm keeping this in mind. So when I look at document 1 here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say if there's a title of it or whatever, I just might put John Randolph doc, not that. And then I want to go into the doc and be able to figure out what in here will help me with my prompt. Again, I'm looking in changes in perception of national identity. How did people begin to view themselves more as American? So the other thing I got to really make sure I keep in mind is 1815 to 1825. So this is a time period when we're beyond the Revolutionary War. We're establishing ourselves. If we look at 815 or 1800, basically to 1825, we're looking at what did the government or society do that helped to enhance its own perception of itself. Okay, so again, I'm looking at John Randolph here. Sir, I am convinced that it would be unjust to aggravate the burdens of the people for the purpose of favoring the manufacturer for this government creating gave power to Congress to regulate commerce. So immediately I'm beginning to see one thing. This is a letter to Congress. That's going to be important because that's going to help us with like source material to be able to understand that this is a legitimate argument complaint. It's not like somebody who lives, outside of Washington is making a complaint. But to aggravate the burdens of the people for the purpose of favoring manufacturers. So maybe he's talking about manufacturing, okay, and gave power to Congress to regulate commerce and equalize duties. With my goodwill, sir, no one interest in the country should be sacrificed by the management of taxation to another. So what is he arguing? He is arguing here essentially that one industry shouldn't, one industry shouldn't be my typing is horrible, primary interest in America. And kind of what I think he's trying to say here is maybe that we shouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket. So we need the manufacturing of the North. We need the agriculture of the West. We need the Southern cash crops in the South. So there can't be one primary interest. So if I look at who's his intended audience, I might put underneath here Congress. And do me a favor, I'll go in and try to fix it, but try to keep the bolded stuff as the titles and everything else not bolded. But so the intended audience is Congress. I might also say all of America, because whenever you make a speech in Congress, you're essentially trying to convince the American populace that they're the ultimate beneficiary. What's the purpose here? So if I'm going back, the purpose is to try to do what? Maybe try to convince America, and I'm just going to put, just as a note to myself, eggs in one basket. And that way I can always come back to it and kind of think about how I can write that a little bit more clearly. So maybe I should say not all eggs, which means you really shouldn't trust that one thing is going to help us. I don't know. I hate to pull up current politics, but if we look at the coronavirus, certainly we can see where we're putting all of our eggs into stay-home orders, or we're putting all of our eggs into just testing. The idea is we want to have a bunch of different avenues that might come to the same conclusion, but from different ways. Anyway, you get the idea. Point of view. So again, all I have to do is one of these, but it's always good if I kind of do two, because if I mess up on one, then two, of course, is going to be, the second one will be used. So again, I'm just trying to break these down as quickly as I can. I know I've already spent 10 minutes on one, but the idea is you want to get this down to where you're doing it in less than 2 minutes for each doc. So when I come back over, after I finish my docs here, I'm going to come over and I'm going to begin to think about what is the context here. So I want to think about what's big context. And I want to write this in full sentences, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to do some bullet points. So full sentences are important. But in this case, context is going to be out of revolutionary period, trying to establish a national identity. You know, we're a young country, and notice I'm going back to the question. So I want to keep trying to tie as much as I can into what I'm saying to the question. What else are we trying to do? Open up the West because of all the natural resources. Maybe I might even put, just as a note to myself, natural resource, because remember, that's always our big want. Then how would I go about beginning to write a thesis? So again, I got to go back to the question, the extent of changes in perception of national identity during this time period. So how did Americans begin to view themselves? So we'd have to come up with, and we'd have to go through all the rest of the documents to be able to look at that, but that is the key. How are we going to write that thesis? So what I want to do real quick is I'm going to show you what a couple of other students have done. So I put these as samples. I apologize if one of yours was chosen, but I have them. If we look under period 4, down at the bottom where the assignment for 2020 period 4 DBQ practice, if you click on it, you'll get student sample 1. And we'll just take a quick look at this. The student does not know I'm using theirs, so I apologize if you didn't give me permission. But what the student did, and it's a little brief, but again, it's more notes for the student. It's more notes for you, because if you're smart, you're going to have one of these made, whether you draw it on a piece of paper or you have a blank piece of paper, you're going to have one of these next to you as you take the test, so that you can quickly jot down what you need to do in your notes. You don't have to keep referring back to the prompt nonstop. So that's kind of our goal. So you can see what the students done. They've broken it down. They've tried to do at least one hip in each. I'd like for you to try to do 2. That's all right. I get a basic idea of what's in each one, but what I probably want to try to include some more here. Government involved in commercial affairs. Well, we know we have just been practicing, you know, I want to include some more information than just kind of what the students say is government involved in commercial affairs. I don't know exactly what that means. Try to be as specific as possible. You can see over here the outlines, under outline. So the context, the Americans just won the War of 1812, gaining their independence from Britain. That's not so good. War of 1812 was the second conflict with Great Britain. We actually won our independence from Great Britain during the Revolutionary War. So this is where you'd have to really be careful in your context, that as you're trying to build your story, it's somewhat correct, okay? And I did not mean, I'm not trying to belittle anybody. This would be correct if they just said the Americans had just won independence from Britain. I would be happy with that. But by putting in the War of 1812, that makes it much more specific. And so therefore it can be wrong if you don't add additional information in there. Here's this person's thesis. Winning the war gave America an intense feeling of nationalism towards their new country. My suggestion on that is that's not enough. Okay, I don't see any claims in there. Can anybody see any claims? Silence means no. So we have to work on our thesis. Our thesis has to include at least 2 claims that are going to support the prompt. Okay, and then you can kind of see the person began to write their claims here. My suggestion I would have included these within your thesis, just briefly outlining. Let's look at the second students and see how they did. And again, you have access to this, so you can see this person had a little bit different information in here, similar to what we've done. If we go back to context, this is not enough for context. What is the era of good feelings? Clearly, it's a time period when people felt good, but why did they feel good? And that's really the key. What I do like is the thesis. The changes in perception of national identity during the era of good feelings, and notice how they restated the prompt, was partially due to differing ideas of taxation and the propositions of new transportation systems. So this is when me as a reader, I have to go back and I have to keep looking at Evaluate the changes in the perception of national identity. So it's how people perceive themselves. The changes of perception was partially due to differing ideas of taxation and the propositions of new transportation systems. But I don't know how those tie back into how people viewed themselves or how people began to develop this idea of national identity or Americanism. So this would be something that we need to work on. But again, we're getting to that point. Always include your claims. Make sure you explain just a little bit and tie back to that overall prompt. And then again, the claims are what are going to support it. They didn't do claim 3 because they only used 2 claims. My other big issue is with this one is notice in evidence. The evidence is great, but we cannot use quotes as evidence. Okay? All you have to do is talk about it. When the document talk about the agriculturalists bear the whole ... then that's okay. But don't just sit there and quote it and let that be your evidence. You have to be able to explain it. My other thing is you have to have at least 2 pieces of evidence per claim. So that means you're going to use 2 different docs. So we should see like doc 1 and doc 4. We should see doc 2 and doc 3 if those were the ones that fit together. But you got to have more than one. I think this person used multiple docs. Great. This person needs to work on that a little bit. And that's okay. That's why we're practicing this. We're trying to get to where we're supposed to be. I'm trying to see how long we've been going here. Anyway, I'll be quick and try to. So if you have questions over that, all you can do is practice, reach out to me. Hey, I'm not understanding this. I'd be happy to work with you. When we look at period 5, and again, I'm going to kind of quickly move through this. Here's period 5's key topics. A couple of them we talked about before the end of first semester, and then we kind of picked up with the Civil War and Reconstruction after first semester. So this was that one period that we kind of broke up. These were the main topics. So what I chose was what I thought to be the topic that maybe they're going to ask about. They could ask about immigration or migration. They could talk about Western expansionism and manifest destiny. But I'm thinking during this period, if they're going to include something, they love to talk about the Reconstruction era. I will continue to put some more review stuff up there. I ran out of time as people were running in, so no biggie there. But here's our period 5 DBQ practice. So we have a new period or a new DBQ that we're going to practice on. It's called Reconstruction. And here's the question that we're going to look at. And notice how it fits exactly in the type of question we've been asked over and over. Evaluate the extent. How much was there a change in Southern society during the period of 1865 to 1900? So how much did Southern society change after the war? So immediately what I would do is I would begin to think about and just brainstorm, what do I think? Well, the South was defeated. What else can I say? The North ran the South, and these are just quick notes, by the military. What else do we know? Northerners came south to help the Southerners. And I may put help in parentheses because we know in some cases they went down there to take advantage of the Southerners. They're called carpetbaggers. What else do we know? After the war, Southern states to re-enter to the Union had to profess a loyalty oath. And again, all I've done is I've just written down some immediate, quick ideas that I could use. So again, the question is evaluate the extent of change in Southern society. So if I look at document 1 here, just as an example, What do we see here? First of all, it's a print from Alfred Wad, I guess, from Harper's Weekly, which was the big magazine of the time period. 1868, we can see a military officer keeping apart what looked to be African Americans on the right and then whites on the left. And what's he doing? So he's trying to break them up. Why would the whites be so upset? And you have to begin to think about this. The whites of the South, in particular, kind of the middle to lower class whites, were competing with for jobs with these newly freed men. Okay, so I can begin to think it's the military's job to help to bridge the gap between these two. Why are the whites so upset? Because they feel like the blacks are now going to be taking their jobs. Plus their whole, and we're talking about general workers here, they were the overseers. They weren't necessarily the workers. And now you're expecting them to work with the people who they previously enslaved. This becomes, so when I go back in to begin to talk about on my planning sheet, right, I'm going to try to write down as much as I can and connect it to the bigger picture. What else? So anyway, just work with this one. You got 5 documents here. So how did life in the South change over time? To what extent did life in the South change? We know that everything that the Southerners experienced all the way through the end of the Reconstruction period, Southerners felt like they were being taken advantage of by the North, and even up through 1900. So anyway, so this is our new one. Like I did say, I will put some more review materials for period 5. We're just trying to get ourselves comfortable with the DBQs now. We'll do some more specific review, but we just want to think about big themes. What type of question are they going to ask us where we're going to be fairly comfortable and we can answer in 45 minutes? That's ultimately the goal. Okay. Like I said, I will put more review materials. But this is, you can also, one of the places you can always go is if you go up to view pages, and yours may look a little different than mine, you can go back to where we were talking about period 5. So you just have to find the date. Here's Washington's Fair, but that's period 3. Let's see. So this is up through the end of the year. Here's period 5 intro. Here's where we talked about sectionalism, evolutionism, fall review. And then when we came back, this is where you kind of come back up here, causes of the Civil War, Reconstruction, review for period 5 quiz. So all of these were classes where you can go back and get resources if you need them. So at this point, I've kind of talked quite a bit. I want to open up questions you may have, things that you've struggled with. But what you got? Any questions?
I'm going to try it on my own.
Good. I mean, and that's all you can do is just work yourself through it. Then when you're done, reach out to me and say, hey, can we do a quick Zoom where you go over my assignment? We can look at it together. I'm more than willing to do that.
Okay. Well, that was all I had to say.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. If you have questions, please ask, and just kind of mess with it a little and try to limit yourself to like 10 minutes of breaking down those documents. I'm not talking about 10 minutes on the context side in the thesis, 10 minutes of just trying to break down those documents as quickly as you can. In fact, you probably want to get even less so you have more time to write, but that gives you 35 minutes to write. So with that being everything, any last questions? Feel free to contact me privately. Take care. See you guys.